Every copywriter must be learning this from fiction, and that is... Oops. I really do not know how people look glamorous in these vlogs, honestly. Copywriting books are very meta, in a sense of it's writing about writing. So you're not really analyzing the real writing, you're learning from writing itself, if that makes any sense. Okay, friends, welcome to the shaky hand paradise, because my hands always shake. Let's say hello. Hello. Anyway, so I've been filming here for the past couple of days, so made this little set. My partner was away, so I could move all the furniture around, and yeah, set myself up. Yeah, recorded a couple of videos, and then always, when you sort of travel, because this is, I'm traveling and this is Airbnb, so it's always difficult because you always have to come up with a way to set, the setup and, have it look great. So that's why, well, not the main reason, but I've been buying lots and lots of novels that we're gonna talk about, lots of books, and they actually make up a lot of this nice background. So I think the novels really helped the books here. So I'm gonna tell you more about them, because the main segment of the vlog will be about how we can learn from fiction as copywriters, as entrepreneurs, and reading fiction, because I think that's an absolutely vital skill to have. And I think most copywriters don't talk about it, but I think reading fiction is super important. Anyway, so that was my little set. Okay, so I'm gonna go make some coffee and then we can sit down and talk about it. Okay, so let's get some coffee done before we go into the whole thing of talking about why fiction is important. Okay, the milk has boiled in the microwave, so let's see how we can froth it up, whether that even can work. Oops. Okie dokie. Actually, I spilled most of the coffee, so this didn't really work out, but oh well, life. Okay, my friends, here we are. I really do not know how people look glamorous in these vlogs, honestly. I managed to spill the coffee 100 times. Yeah, we can get started, I guess. So these are the books that I've been reading in the past couple of months since I got to Portugal, because yeah, when I got here I had literally those couple of books there, and by now I bought all of these. I've read, I guess, 70% of it, meaning 70% overall, because I sometimes don't finish books. Copywriting books are very meta, in a sense of it's writing about writing. So you're not really analyzing the real writing, you're learning from writing itself, if that makes any sense. Well, so when it gets to fiction, you're starting to understand how text works, how writing works, how syntax works, how grammar works. And I think it's absolutely underrated in the online space, in a sense of nobody says, well, go and read novels. I think it's absolutely crucial, because it really allows you to improve your writing capabilities. And I think storytelling in copywriting is absolutely important, and most business owners and copywriters sort of forget it. They go for very generic, very online sort of formats of writing email copy, for example. But I think it's so important that you actually end up telling stories in your writing as a business owner, as a copywriter. So that's what fiction can do for you. And for example, I want to share my process, how I read and what I get out of each novel, and how I then apply it to my writing of emails, landing pages, sales pages, you name it. Before I do that, I want to just quickly show you how I select these books. So now here where I live in Portugal, in Cascais, there's an amazing bookstore, and I'm going to give them a shout out. I think it's called Indeed Not a Bookstore, and they have this an amazing section of English books, and I literally go there every Sunday, and literally without an exaggeration, I spend there around a couple of hours browsing through piles and piles of books, and seeing which book lands on my lap, so to speak, seeing which book resonates with me the most. And obviously, as you see, I end up buying more than one. But that process of spending a couple of hours in the bookstore and going through a gazillion of books really sort of introduces me to a number of writers that I would have never heard about, that I would have never read about. And yeah, and this is how I pick novels and books to read, at least in the past 3 months. So what I want to talk about now is take book by book possibly, or at least showcase a couple of books and share how I borrow the best of the book and apply it to my writing. For example, actually this book, I brought it apparently. So I brought it here to Portugal by Elif Shafak, and 10 minutes and 38 seconds in this strange world. And this is an exhilarating novel in a sense that it's interestingly structured because it recounts a life of a prostitute who gets killed in Istanbul. As she's passing out, as she is losing her consciousness, she sort of recounts her entire life in those 10 minutes and 38 seconds whilst she's still semi-conscious. And I really loved what she's done and how she pieced the whole novel. It's a great writer. But so what I was wanting to say, what I want to talk about, I want to have some coffee. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about is, what do we do as copywriters, as sort of business owners who write in our business? How do we use fiction and why it's important in our process? When I read her book, my biggest takeaway was how you can be having an overall arc of a story and sort of doing these flashbacks, memories to different sort of aspects of life. And when I read it, I obviously sometimes also think about writing my own book or novel, but at the same time, I'm also thinking, how can I apply it to my storytelling? So, for example, when you write an email to your list, it's always very interesting to not only be writing a sales email, but actually having these segues from, having a story that you want to tell and segueing into a product, a service, or whatever call to action you want them to take. So I think when you read a novel like that, it gives you a good idea of how you can do that. So how can you be writing an email and telling a story that is engaging, that is interesting to your list, that is not only a sales email, but then somewhere halfway through the story or towards the end of the story, having a segue into a call to action, into a sale, into invitation to subscribe, and so on. So this is what I was taking away from this book. Then the other one that I discovered that was absolutely ravishing, inspiring, and I absolutely loved it was Elizabeth Strout. Elizabeth Strout is an American writer, and she has this amazing ability to write about ordinary life in a way that is extraordinary. She has this ability to use a fairly simple language in a way that is magical. She writes in a way that her sentences are very economical, very thought out, very condensed, and very efficient. So this is my probably main learning. So for example, we have this sentence, and when I fell asleep, I stayed asleep all night, which surprised me. It was a Thursday night. I remember that. I just love how powerful, simple, and economical her sentences are. What she does in this sentence, she says, well, I fell asleep, I stayed asleep all night, and which surprised me, which means that she hasn't been sleeping very well. And in those 3 words, she manages to tell us that. She says, which surprised me. So she doesn't say, I haven't been sleeping well for weeks, and now I've slept well, and this is great. Instead of telling it, she shows it. And this is the rule that I talk a lot about in my videos, which is show, don't tell. And that's what she does. So here's another one. The main character is in a lockdown. It's COVID. And she's not very comfortable about it. And after a long paragraph, she goes, and I could still not get used to it, full stop. But I could do this for 2 weeks, I told myself. And that little addition, I told myself, shows us that she has been struggling to convince herself that she could do it, I find it absolutely mesmerizing. So when I read something like this, I'm always thinking how I could apply it to my copy, to my emails that I'm writing, to my landing pages. Another one that I loved was, for example, just looking at punctuation as well. Look at the sentence. This was the first time I felt a really deep apprehension. So the way she inserted the word really to emphasize it as in a spoken language, I love that. So when it came to Elizabeth Strout, it was a lot of that, a lot of learning. What she was doing beautifully is how she was having sort of scenes scattered across the novel, and how the time would pass between 2 paragraphs and it would just be made apparent within a sentence or a little dash at the top. So I think that if you want to really improve the way you write your emails, you want your language to become punchier, stronger. Elizabeth Strout is a really good example of that. Okay, so let's talk about another one, and that is Turbulence by David Saleh. What I loved about this novel, it was how he tells a story through sort of 12 different chapters, 12 different scenes, and through the perspectives of 12 different people. It's one of those sort of collages of stories, very much like, you know, that film Paris, I Love You, and then there was one about, I think, New York as well, where you have like multiple stories of different people, sort of different scenes, and then towards the film you realize that all these stories are connected. So he's doing the same. So the next chapter would pick up where the other chapter had left off, but it would sort of pick a random almost person from the previous chapter, or like it might have been like a cab driver, a flight attendant, or whoever had been present in the other chapter but wasn't the main protagonist, but was just a sort of a random passerby character. That character becomes the central character of the following chapter. So that's a very interesting technique that he's been employing here. But as a copywriter, I think what you could be learning is how you plant those seeds across, for example, your promotional emails. You know, if you have an email sequence of 12 emails, how do you tell a story across those 12 emails? How do you make them sort of come across as a story, as a narrative, rather than just like an accumulation of random sales emails, which most people do. So this is, I think, where you tap into fiction to get ideas for your copywriting, for your sales writing. Okay, and let's do one more novel. So Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jadrowski. It's actually a gay love story in the Soviet Union. Subject matter in itself is very interesting because obviously you didn't have gay love in Soviet Union. I mean, it just didn't exist. And it was criminal behavior. So it's interesting how he explores that. For me, it was how he managed to convey passion, desire, lust in words. And it's an interesting exercise to observe how people, first of all, express sexual passion in writing. But secondly, what all sales writing is about passion, is about desire. Obviously not sexual desire, it's about, you know, desire to change your circumstance, desire to acquire skill or a bit of knowledge. So we as sales writers, as copywriters, we need to tap into that desire. So I think when you read novels like this one, what you're doing, you're learning how does a writer communicate the idea of drive, motivation, desire, passion, and then borrow some of those techniques in your own writing. So when it comes to actually learning about desire and communicating desire in your writing and learning that, I would read Thomas Mann, Death in Venice, and I would read Lolita by Nabokov. And I feel these are the other two books that do that super well. And obviously they are great pieces of literary fiction and they are just masterpieces. But, you know, just reading it and thinking, which bits can I pick from it? What can I learn from it? I think that's already super powerful, and that any of us could do it. And this is my check-in from beautiful and gorgeous Madeira. So I've been reading a lot over this holiday, and at the same time have been writing a lot, but also starting to write scenes. So this idea of writing scenes came from Elizabeth Strout, this writer that I referred to earlier. So she said that when she was writing one of her novels, she was quite busy and she would have to bring her daughter to school and so on. So what she would do, she would literally write scenes. So she wouldn't have to have complete chapters, she wouldn't have to have, you know, mapped out sort of narratives, dialogues. For example, if she was on a train or whatever, I mean, I'm just retelling what she said, so I might be getting it wrong, but the essence of it was that she would write her scene down whenever she could, in the way that she could, and yeah, and she would sort of store these scenes. So that idea, that one sort of thought about writing really liberated me to explore, you know, other possibilities of writing. Recently, I've been having this urge to explore fiction, narrative fiction, and see what comes of it, just for the fun of it, like not trying, you know, commit to anything because my business endeavors are my primary focus. I thought, what would it be like if I just allowed myself to play with scenes, if I allowed myself to write scenes? And honestly, I've been having a blast, and I would write a scene here and there for the past month, and I'm loving them, and I think they are something that can either later be used and turn into a short story, a novel, or possibly even be used in my promotional emails. I think the most important thing is to cultivate that habit of writing, to constantly get to it and to constantly write whatever you write, whether it's, sales copy, whether it's marketing posts for an accounting company, as I always say. It doesn't matter. Just get to your desk, just write a little bit, write a paragraph, write a scene, and something is going to come of it. And every word will get you closer to you being a better copywriter, a better entrepreneur, a better salesperson, whichever your path is. Okay, friends, so as part of this vlog, I'd like to just riff about what can we be learning from fiction. And I've done like all these multiple segments, but there are a few sort of key points that I'd like to maybe talk about, and things that really have been helping me over the years, but also currently as I've been reading more and more. So let's get started. So the first thing that I think we should all be learning from fiction, every copywriter must be learning this from fiction, and that is telling good stories. Because a lot of the time, copywriters tend to focus on making their copy salesy, engaging, but in a way that is just sort of salesy without the soul. Having and telling good stories is a soul to your copy. So it's no longer some wishy-washy piece. It actually stands out as a strong piece of writing on its own, as well as a sales page. So when you read your next novel, when you read a short story, and yes, you should be reading short stories as well, you should be paying attention to the way the story is structured, what the author is doing, what words is the author using, how is the author creating the world of the story. And you can literally borrow all of this and use them in your marketing emails, in your sales copy. And I do that all the time. I'd love to write a book, but I don't know when I'll get around to doing it. But I write lots of emails. And when I read a lovely piece of writing, I go and look at it and I think, well, this is what I could be doing in my own marketing emails. So for example, I was referring to Elizabeth Strout, and I love the economy of her sentences, how efficient, productive, light her sentences are. Sometimes when I write an email, I go, well, remember the way Elizabeth Strout writes. Can you induce a little bit of that? And it does not mean losing your voice. It does not mean copying. It means sort of getting inspired by good writing. And I think us entrepreneurs, as copywriters, we often look at other entrepreneurs, other copywriters as our role models. But I would encourage us all to look at writers, fiction writers, as our possible role models. And that would really bring in something new. That would bring in a new aesthetic to your emails, and they would stand out. They would stand out of this whole like sleazy fashion of writing emails that is very, very common. And it's much easier to sort of write in a very salesy, sleazy way without adding a soul, without bringing in something of integrity and substance. So I would encourage us to be learning more about good storytelling. Another aspect that we could all be learning from writing fiction, from reading fiction rather, and then translating all of that into copywriting is character development. Now, when you read a good piece of literature or a film script, you want to have characters that are fully developed. That means that even the least important characters actually have a well-developed life, a well-developed personality, that they wouldn't be just cliches that only serve the plot, but they would actually be a 3D human beings who have their own life, and their life is only intersecting. So this is what good literature does. It has good character development. So when you look at such medium, think to yourself, how can I bring that into my emails? How can I bring that into my sales pages? And that might mean for you to fully develop a brand story, or to fully develop your own story as an entrepreneur, or to fully develop your story as a copywriter, and show up as a 3D, fully fleshed, real, vulnerable, successful, and interesting and exciting human being that you are, and actually telling a story, not only just selling. And I think that would be a big game changer for a lot of copywriters and for a lot of entrepreneurs if they did that. Now, it's not the easiest thing to do because it requires much more work than just bashing out some random copy which says, buy this. But this is what I really love about copywriting. This is why I love writing overall. It's actually the art of telling stories. So another thing that I pay attention to when I read is grammar, and more importantly, punctuation, because I just love how some writers use punctuation. So writing a sales page or writing emails or writing anything is very much like writing a piece of music. And you have to have a certain melody to it. You have to have a certain sound to it, and every voice has a different sound to it. Especially if you are a copywriter and you're writing for different clients, they all have different voices. And now you use punctuation to bring out that voice, to add the melody to the music. It helps and aids the way the text is read. So I would say pay attention to punctuation because it's much more important than you think it is. There are some really good books, style guides on writing. And for example, this one is a new one that I bought. It's called An Utterly Correct Guide to Clarity and Style by Benjamin Dreyer. This is something that I think every person who writes copy should read every year once. And this literally guides you through everything in relation to grammar, in relation to style, punctuation, and so on. And it really makes you a better writer. It is a read that will really elevate your writing. And the advice that I'm giving you here is not necessarily the most glamorous advice, but it's advice that really works. And I only advise you to do this because I come from that sort of world. I trained as a theater director. I used to work as a playwright professionally, and I know how important that is. And all those skills really served me in my career as an entrepreneur, in my path as a copywriter, because I bring all of that knowledge, all that skill in storytelling. What I'm saying is you need to just pick up this book and read it. And then you need to read fiction and then underline good sentences and underline good stories and analyze the way the characters are written, and do that once a month, and you'll see an immense improvement in your writing. And in between of finishing this whole vlog about learning from fiction and what we can learn from fiction writers, we managed to launch, or just about to launch, a new funnel, a new product, and that is our journaling product. And we've been working on a quiz around it, and I talked about the whole positioning and the project and the landing page in the previous vlog, so you can just sort of click somewhere on the screen and watch it. Honestly, sometimes developing so many things at the same time, is super exhausting. You end up at the end of the day sort of just flat out. And especially because I run a language school, I run currently another funnel, another project about memberships and how to build memberships. And then we're starting this new journaling product. So basically there's quite a lot to do. And then YouTube as well. So there's plenty. And I think the challenge is always to be switching between projects and keeping track and knowing where you're at with each one of them. For example, I started this vlog, almost 2 weeks ago. And then I sort of had to mentally follow through, and whenever I got a chance, I would film something for it. Meanwhile, there are 2 other projects running, plus we are launching a new one. And to be very frank with you, I have a gazillion other ideas that I don't even tell my team about. I just work on those ideas when I get a moment, just because I get excited about those. Which is probably not the smartest thing to do, because you kind of get overwhelmed and you get quite tired, but I guess this is what happens, when you don't have children. Because when I talk to my friends who have children, they all seem to be very overwhelmed and they never have time for anything. So I guess that's a nice part. And by the way, let me know if these vlogs are of value. And if so, comment yes down below and I'll be making more of these. And of course, if no, then just let me know.